a 7 months pregnant woman floating peacefully in the shallow end of her community pool, wearing bright yellow floaties on her arms because her doctor recommended water exercises to ease her back pain. And she's smiling for the first time in weeks because the cool water is giving her swollen ankles relief. When suddenly, a hand reaches down, rips those floaties right off her arms, and throws them onto the concrete deck with a wet slap that echoes across the entire pool area. Sarah Martinez looked up in shock to see Linda Whitmore, you know, that neighbor, the one everyone calls Karen, behind her back, standing there in her hot pink tankini with her hands on her hips, gold bangles jangling, sunglasses perched on her blonde bob like a crown of entitlement. And she's got this twisted smile on her face like she just won the lottery. "Pool rules clearly state no flotation devices in the main pool," Karen announced loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear, pointing at the sign like she's a lawyer presenting evidence. "And I don't care if you're pregnant, rules are rules, sweetie." Now, here's the thing about Sarah. She's the kind of person who apologizes when someone else bumps into her, the type who bakes cookies for new neighbors and always waves even when people don't wave back. So when Karen snatched those floaties, Sarah didn't yell or curse. She just felt her eyes well up with tears because pregnancy hormones are real and because she was finally comfortable for the first time in days. And now this woman she barely knows is treating her like a criminal for trying to exercise safely. Sarah's voice cracked as she said, "I'm sorry. I didn't realize. My doctor said water exercise would help. And the floaties were just for extra support because my balance isn't great right now." But Karen cut her off with a dramatic hair flip and said, "I don't care what your doctor said. I've been living in Willow Creek Estates for 12 years, and I've reported 17 pool violations, and guess what? Every single one got handled. So you're not special just because you decided to have a baby." The other people at the pool, there were maybe 8 or 9 residents scattered on lounge chairs. They all pretended to be looking at their phones or suddenly very interested in their towels. Because that's what people do when confrontation happens. They disappear into themselves hoping they won't become the next target. But one woman, elderly Mrs. Patterson, she whispered to her husband loud enough for others to hear, that Linda is at it again. Last month she reported the Johnsons for having their grandkids' birthday party balloons tied to the fence. Meanwhile, Sarah was trying to climb out of the pool without her floaties, moving slowly because her center of gravity was completely off, and you could see her struggling, one hand on the pool edge, the other on her belly. And she was breathing hard, not from exertion but from trying not to cry in public. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to Rayan Review 2.0 for more real emotional HOA stories. That's when David Martinez walked through the pool gate carrying 2 bottles of cold water and a pregnancy pillow for his wife, smiling because he'd just been thinking about how lucky he was to have a partner like Sarah, how excited he was about becoming a dad in 2 months, and how perfect their life was becoming. Until he saw his pregnant wife struggling at the pool's edge with tears streaming down her face, saw the yellow floaties sitting in a wet pile on the concrete 15 feet away, and saw Karen Whitmore standing there with her arms crossed, looking proud of herself. "What happened?" David asked, his voice still calm but with an edge that people who know him would recognize as a warning sign. And Sarah, still trying not to make a scene, said quietly, "It's okay, honey, the floaties apparently aren't allowed, and I should have read the rules more carefully." But David wasn't looking at Sarah anymore. He was looking at Karen, and he asked very directly, "Did you take my wife's floaties off her arms while she was in the water?" Karen, sensing she had an audience and loving every second of attention, launched into her speech. "Your wife was violating Community Pool Regulations subsection 4.2.7, which explicitly prohibits inflatable recreational devices in the main swimming area. And as a concerned resident and frequent pool user, I have every right to enforce." But David held up one hand to stop her and said, "I didn't ask for a speech. I asked a yes or no question. Did you physically remove safety equipment from my pregnant wife?" The way he said safety equipment instead of floaties changed the whole energy. Suddenly, this wasn't about pool toys. This was about a vulnerable woman's well-being, and Karen's face twitched because she could feel the narrative slipping away from her. So she doubled down. "They're not safety equipment. They're children's arm floaties, and if your wife can't swim without them, maybe she shouldn't be in the pool at all. That's when something shifted in David's face. Not to anger exactly, but to that cold, calculated determination that comes when someone crosses a line they can never uncross. And he walked calmly over to the pool rules sign that Karen had been citing like scripture, pulled out his phone, took a picture of it, zoomed in, and read out loud. Pool rules. Section 4.2.7. No inflatable recreational devices including rafts, large pool toys, or inner tubes in the main pool area. Flotation aids for safety purposes are permitted with lifeguard or management approval. He turned to Karen and said, Floaties for a pregnant woman doing doctor-recommended water therapy aren't recreational. They're safety aids, which means you didn't enforce a rule. You just bullied my wife because you felt like it. The other pool-goers were suddenly very interested in this conversation. Phones were definitely recording now, and Mrs. Patterson actually said, out loud in support. Karen's face was turning red, not from embarrassment, but from rage that someone dared challenge her authority. And she said, Well, I didn't see any lifeguard approval, and I've been on the pool committee for 6 years. So I think I know the rules better than some random resident who probably didn't even read the HOA handbook. David smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been pushed too far and just decided to push back. And he said, You're absolutely right. You should know the rules better, which is why you should also know Pool Regulation 3.1.5, harassment, intimidation, or physical contact with other residents without consent can result in immediate suspension of pool privileges and a formal HOA hearing. Karen laughed. That shrill, performative laugh that people use when they're nervous but trying to seem confident. And she said, Oh, please, I have every right to be here. And nobody's going to suspend me when I'm the one trying to keep this community safe and... But she didn't finish that sentence, because David, in one smooth motion, picked up his wife's yellow floaties from the concrete, walked directly to Karen and said, You threw these out of the pool because you wanted control. Let me show you what that feels like. If you're feeling this story, hit that like button and share this video to support Rayan Review 2.0. Now, David didn't touch Karen. Let's be crystal clear about that, because what happened next was completely her own doing. He simply held up the wet floaties and said, These belong to my wife. You had no right to touch them. And I'm formally asking you to apologize to her right now. Karen, instead of apologizing or de-escalating, did what entitled people do when confronted. She escalated, stepping backward dramatically and shouting, Don't you threaten me! I'll call the police! I'll have you arrested for... And that's when it happened. Karen stepped back onto the pool deck's wet surface right next to the edge. Her white pool sandals with the little heels lost traction on the slick tiles. Her arms windmilled forward trying to catch balance. Her mouth opened in a perfect O of surprise, and she fell backward directly into the pool with a massive splash that sent water cascading over the sides and soaking the nearest lounge chairs. The silence that followed was deafening for exactly 2 seconds, and then Mrs. Patterson started laughing, and then her husband started laughing. And then suddenly 6 or 7 other people were laughing, not mean laughter exactly, but that release of tension laughter that happens when a bully finally faces consequences for their behavior. Karen surfaced, sputtering and furious, her blonde bob plastered to her head, mascara running down her cheeks, her designer sunglasses floating away toward the pool filter, and she screamed, He pushed me! You all saw it! He assaulted me! But here's the beautiful irony. 3 people had their phones out recording the whole thing, and David hadn't even been within arm's reach of her when she fell. Which meant Karen had just lied in front of multiple witnesses with video evidence to prove it. David calmly helped Sarah get her floaties back on, supported her as she carefully lowered herself back into the shallow end, and then turned to the small crowd and said, Anyone who wants to send their video footage to the HOA office, I'd appreciate it. I think we need a formal review of what happened here today. Karen was climbing out of the pool now, absolutely drenched, her hot pink tankini clinging in all the wrong ways. And she was pointing at David with a shaking hand, screaming, This isn't over! I'm reporting you! I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. Her silver gray hair perfectly professional, her rimless glasses catching the sunlight, and she said in a voice that commanded immediate silence, I've been watching from the clubhouse window for the past 10 minutes. And Linda, we need to talk. Want to hear more life-changing HOA tales every week? Subscribe to Rayan Review 2.0 and never miss the next twist. What nobody knew, not even Karen, was that Margaret had been documenting Karen's behavior for months. 17 noise complaints filed against families with young children, 9 reports about lawn decorations that were perfectly within regulations, 6 accusations of parking violations that turned out to be false, and now this. Physically removing safety equipment from a pregnant resident, and then filing a false assault claim. Margaret looked at Karen, who was dripping and shaking with rage, and said, Linda, this is your 4th incident this year involving harassment of residents. And it's the first one with video evidence and multiple witnesses. We're suspending your pool privileges for the remainder of the season, and you're required to attend a community mediation session. Karen's face went from red to white to purple in about 5 seconds, and she sputtered, You can't do this to me! I've been a model resident. I enforce the rules when nobody else will. Margaret adjusted her glasses and said, Linda, there's a difference between enforcing rules and using rules as weapons to control your neighbors. One builds community, the other destroys it. And you've been destroying it for years while we gave you chances to change. The pool area was completely silent now, except for the gentle sound of water lapping against the tiles. And Karen looked around at all the faces staring at her. Some sympathetic, some satisfied, most just tired of her drama, and you could see something break in her expression, not sadness exactly, but the realization that she'd finally pushed too far and lost. She grabbed her designer sunglasses from where they were floating near the filter, snatched her pool bag from her lounge chair, and walked toward the gate. But before she left, she turned back and said, Fine, I hope you all enjoy your rule-free paradise where anyone can do whatever they want. And Mrs. Patterson, bless her heart, called out, We will, Linda, we absolutely will. After Karen left, the energy at the pool completely shifted. People started talking again. Kids who'd been quiet started splashing, and Sarah was back floating peacefully in the shallow end with her yellow floaties, this time with David sitting on the pool edge next to her, his feet in the water, one hand resting protectively on her shoulder. Margaret came over to check on Sarah, apologized profusely for not intervening sooner, and explained that they'd been building a case against Karen because they needed ironclad documentation before taking action, and today's incident with witnesses and video evidence finally gave them what they needed. Sarah, being Sarah, actually said, I hope she's okay. I didn't want anyone to get in trouble. I just wanted to float for a little while. And Margaret smiled sadly and said, That's exactly why we needed to act. People like you stay quiet, and people like Linda take advantage of that silence until someone finally stands up. 2 weeks later, Sarah and David received a formal letter from the HOA. Karen had been required to attend 3 mediation sessions focused on community harmony and conflict resolution. Her pool privileges were reinstated after she completed the sessions and issued written apologies to 5 different residents, including Sarah, and most surprisingly, Karen had actually shown up at Sarah and David's door one evening, looking smaller somehow without her armor of entitlement, and she said, I'm sorry for what I did at the pool. I've been using rules to make myself feel important because I didn't feel important in any other way. And that was wrong, especially to someone who was just trying to take care of herself and her baby. Sarah, being the kind soul she is, invited Karen in for tea, and they talked for an hour about loneliness, about purpose, about how easy it is to become the villain in your own story when you're trying too hard to be the hero. Karen didn't become Sarah's best friend or anything. Some relationships are broken beyond repair, but she did stop filing frivolous complaints. She did start saying hello to neighbors instead of looking for violations. And when Sarah's baby girl was born in September, Karen was one of the first people to drop off a handmade baby blanket with a note that said, For the Floaty Warrior, may she always stand up for what's right. David framed one of the screenshots from the pool video, the moment right before Karen fell, with her face twisted in entitled rage, and hung it in his home office with a caption that reads, The moment Karma learned to swim. The moral of this story isn't about revenge or public humiliation. It's about understanding that rules without compassion become weapons, that authority without accountability becomes tyranny, and that sometimes the people who seem the most powerful are actually the most afraid, lashing out because they don't know how else to feel seen. Thanks for watching Rayan Review 2.0, where every story teaches a lesson. Like, share, and subscribe for more emotional neighborhood dramas.